Um, I'm the CEO of Making Science, to give you who we are, basically. So we are an integrated marketing and technology company, which is kind of a interesting animal because we have like 80 software. We are in total 250 people here in Madrid, and we have 80 software developers, data engineers, and data scientists, 80 creative and designers, and 80 which are marketing specialists, right? So we have access to a lot of data, and since we have the marketing inside, we are capable of basically putting in production a lot of use cases, and actually measure the models. Of course, we are able to build all the ETLs and all the data pipes and build a lot of models, and we are able to test a lot of things because we have basically the full value chain inside, right? And today, I'm going to be talking to you about all the AdTech and Martech ecosystem, right? And how we are building different models, of course, of advanced analytics and a lot of machine learning models to do activation, right? So as I said, we are 250 people, and we integrated a few companies, and we provide all the services to SMO, again, so we do it from software developer to digital marketing, to SEO, to design, to UX, UI, and we are able to go to do very quickly everything and we work with very large clients. We have more than 120 clients, specifically in the area of advertising technology and marketing technology, right? And I would say, like, in terms of, basically, I'm a computer science engineer, and I finished a long time ago in the school, and my thesis was on artificial intelligence in 1993, and was very interesting. I was working about expert systems and all those kind of things, and the first neural networks. And it's interesting, like, the new wave of AI and advanced analytics is coming from the UX, right? The UX and how we can interact with users. And the basic reason is because that's where all the data is created. Of course, there is a lot of much more areas where a lot of data is created, like IoT and many other things. But the interaction of companies and of consumers with companies in the different assets and with the different platforms is basically what is creating the big wave of change, and of course with the Netflix, with the Spotify, with the Amazon, with the Google, and so on, right? And our thesis when we work with our clients is like the shift, from traditional companies to companies that are doing the digital transformation is moving very quickly, what we call smart companies. And if you were measuring a traditional company, but the size of their fixed assets, of the traditional assets, how many houses in my balance sheet, how many plants I have, how much machinery I have. Digital company would be measured by how many intangible assets you have, how much software you have, how many servers you have, how many web pages you have, how many apps, how many users, what is your monthly average user. The smart companies are going to be measured by something which is different, which is how much data are you processing, how many models you have active, in the different parts of your value chain, from your supply, in your value chain, from the supply chains to your warehouses to how you interact with consumers, right? And that's what's going to change. That's what's going to define what are the winner companies of the future. How many models you have active, how much data are you processing, and how much data are you processing, right? And that's basically what we do. Of course, you can have data in all the parts of the organization. We focus on the marketing and sales data, and it's interesting because marketing and sales, if your predictive model doesn't work very well, it's not a crisis, right? It's not like you are the problem of having a false negative is not a problem, right? Because you have an accuracy better than 70% is good, 80% is good. So it's a very interesting field for testing as well, and be able to iterate very quickly with the data, with the models, and with the consumers, right? So it's not by coincidence, as I was saying before, like all this revolution is starting by consumers interacting with companies. One of the reasons is because the problem of failing is not big, right? If you are doing a model for an Airbus to fly, or you are doing a model for a satellite to send to the moon, if the model is not good, it's a big problem. In marketing and sales, it's not a problem. Maybe a CMO is fired, but that happens every day, so it's not a big problem, right? And the reason of the very fast pace of progress in that field is the fact that we are able to iterate very quickly with the data, and that there is a lot of data which is produced. If this is probably you are familiar with this. This is the McKinsey research, the McKinsey Institute of the opportunities of advanced analytics and machine learning in terms of what are the areas of the companies where AI and advanced analytics are going to have bigger impact. And you see, like, the biggest one is marketing and sales, which is interesting. So it's the area where we focus, and it's a very big area. And the other one is supply chain management and manufacturing, and you have all the different areas of the company, like risk, service operation, product development, right? And it's not a coincidence as well, because companies do spend a lot of money on marketing. So if you are in sales, so you are able to optimize, advanced analytics and machine learning is going to help you to make better prediction and optimize models. You are going to be able to save a lot of money, right? And that's where we focus. I'm going to be telling you about different things we are doing, right, in the ecosystem, right? Also, this is the Gartner CMO survey that is published every year, and what basically Gartner asks the CMOs in the US is basically where are they putting their dollars, right? And you see, like, in 2019 and 18, and we have the new one, but it's not here, but basically the area where they are investing more money is in the marketing technology. So they are going to be spending less money in people, in agencies. They are going to be spending less money in media, and they are going to be spending less money in people, internal people that is going to execute the campaign. So they also see the opportunity that automation and be able to use the data to get better return on investment on their dollars, and it's happening. Interesting thing is what's going on in the advertising and marketing technology space. Maybe you are familiar with these slides. This is the Luma Martech, Chief Martech view of the ecosystem, and basically what you can see is the different players in the advertising technology and marketing technology. Different companies that are doing things. So you can see here, like, companies that are doing mobile marketing, companies that are doing mobile apps, creative optimization, video ad management, search ad management, social media, landing page microsites, blogs. So all the different technologies that you might use if you are a company, a CMO that wants to go to the market and you need a marketing strategy, a landing page, a campaign, and so on, right? So the interesting thing of this is, like, all these are platforms and systems, and all systems generate a lot of data, right? So there is a lot of opportunity. But I would also ask you to focus on the date. So this is 2011, right? And you already can see a crowded ecosystem, right? So at this time, all these systems and all these platforms were generating a lot of data. And this is what happened in 2016, right? So the ecosystem gets much more complicated, and it's probably not by chance also. I mean, the fact that there are more and more platforms that companies are using and so on, it demands from you much more other platforms, right? So again, these are systems, that are generating data, and in this one you can see, like, organized by areas, like advertising and promotion, content and experience, social relationship, commerce, data, and data management, right? So more and more platforms, more and more data. And this is the Martech 5000, right? So this is 2018, which it's a nonsense, I would say, right? So 5,000 companies is a lot of companies, especially imagine doing a few RFPs to understand what they do, right? So I mean, why is this happening? This is happening also because of the previous slide of McKinsey. There is a lot of dollars, so there is a lot of money to be made if you are doing advanced analytics, data management, and machine learning projects, right? So big opportunity in terms of if a company which is focused on that, which is our case, right? But at the same time, marketing problems are the same, right? If you ask a CMO what he wants to do, I mean, I would say, how can I sell more? What is my optimal media mix? How is the consumer journey of my customers? Will this visitor buy or not? What flows do I recommend my consumers? If you were back to 1960 and ask a CMO what were her problems, it would be the same problems, right? The thing is, like, right now the tools and the solutions are different, but there are new questions, right? Because we have all these platforms that I was explaining before. there are new questions, there are new things that you can do. For example, should I bid for that visitor? So because now the visitor is a visitor which is visiting your website or is using your application, and you have all that data. And the question is, should I show an ad to that consumer or not? And that was not a question that you could ask 20 years ago, right? Because when you were doing, for example, television, everybody would see the same ad. Right now, when you are in an online platform, you can decide based on data and based on predictive models whether you should show an ad to that user or whether you should bid for that user in the future, or what is the propensity of that consumer to buy a product, right? Or what will be my conversion rate next month, right? So I mean, the platform sees, in one side, the problems of the CMOs is the same, like it's been in the past, but at the same time, the platforms are going to be helping you to solve new problems, right? So thinking a bit let's say any client is doing, what do they use information for, and what are the kind of use cases or problems that we are solving for them? And basically, let's think about how in marketing and sales you use information. And basically, I mean, it's not marketing and sales, it's everything. Basically, we use information for three things, right? To understand what happened, to understand what's going on, and to try to understand what will happen. The what will happen in the past was, a hunch, basically, I think my smell says that it's going to be like that. So the what will happen was a very dangerous territory in the past, and basically you have all the models built in your brain out of experience, right? And the good ones were able to predict the future. And the what is happening was also a problem in the past because the data was not ready. I remember 20 years ago, with business objects, that the data warehouse, the cycles were a month. It was a month before you have all the data at the beginning, right? So what is happening? It's been a problem up to, let's say, 10 or 10 years, but now it's a reality that you can really work on what is happening, right? What happened, has been traditionally the domain of the decision making, right, of the information, because you could see what were your sales in the past, what was the segmentation of our consumers in the past, because you have all the data and reporting and data coming from different data sources, right? So in terms of what you do, you would do reports and dashboards, right? The past is being, let's say, a problem which has been solved by technology in the different waves of technology. The thing is now you have much more granularity, right? And because you have much more granularity on the data, you are going to be able to understand more things, get more insights, and maybe probably make better decisions. The what is happening, I think there is a big revolution right now in terms of what you can do if you are working in marketing and sales problems, because you have a lot of data pipes coming to different systems, and you can design things that are going to be able to react real time to consumers and be able to make decisions and to take actions on what's going on. And that also, the big revolution is what will happen, right? Which, if we combine the prediction with the real time, then you can be ahead of the game of your competition, right? And we see what Google and Facebook and Amazon do in terms of when you are able to combine the real time with a very good predictive modeling, what you can do for consumers in terms of everything. We will go later into different use cases, what you can do in terms of optimizing the user experience, in terms of optimizing where you spend your dollars, and so on. The reality is, like, all this data, like most of the data is still unactivated, right? I mean, we do some surveys of our clients, what do they use the data from, coming from all these platforms, and even many times they don't use the basic reporting capabilities of all those platforms, right? So even though we are generating a lot of data, so very little data is still in marketing and sales analyzed, and very little data activated, right? And again, the problem is, like, it's a lot of, right now, where we see in a lot of our clients is like, there is like the hype in terms of the data is a bit down, because they're spending, I think they're spending a lot of money in different platforms, right? And the return on investment is not getting to me, right? Because basically it's a lot of complexity, and you only generate value, as you can see when you do an activation of that platform, either with a decision or with a predictive model which is online. So just with the introduction, let's focus on the different data sources and the different things we can do in marketing operations, right? So ideally, I mean, when you think about the consumer journey of a consumer, let's say a consumer that you don't know at all, historically, you can have basically a consumer which is around that you want to target, and still you have offline and online impact or opportunity to impact that customer. You can see below you have the offline, or above you have the online, and your customer will follow a process of considering your product from the awareness, consideration phase, purchase, service, and then on the fidelization, right? And in theory, in online, we should be able to track everything we do with them, right? And we are going to see later some examples of how we can do that. Because with the online platforms, with the ad server, you can track from the very first time you touch a consumer with an ad, with the first ad, with an impression of the ad. There are some limitations now with GDPR. But basically, you should be able to track what happens with that consumer from the very first ad you saw him, to understand if you saw him another second ad, if he visited your website, if he bought, then if he came back, because you have your analytics platform, if you saw him another ad, and so on. So you can see below, it's a problem that could be solved, because basically, in terms, you have data from everything the customer did, right? So it's a known problem. It's a lot of data, but it's a problem that you can solve, by different techniques, right? Which was a problem that in marketing was unsolvable in the past, only using like very generic statistics, right? Because in theory, from the very impact you have to that user, you could create a profile of that user with give him a profile ID in one of your platforms, right? And from there, make different predictive models work for you, right? So, I mean, the accuracy of the models, of course, is going to get improving as you get much more data from that consumer, as he visits you more, as you show him more ads. But eventually, you can create a propensity to buy your product from the very first interaction, and then moving on, the churn probability, of course, it's going to be 0, right, at the beginning, because it's not your customer yet, right? Then you can understand, what is their next best product recommendation from them, and as a new touch points, a new data is coming around that consumer, the different predictive models should be able to optimize, what kind of products are you showing that client. So in terms of, if we compare 30 years ago of what is the kind of things you can do, it's basically you can do everything, right? Because it's coming from 0 data to basically all the data, right? Today, if you are, especially for online, you can approach the challenge of doing marketing and sales, assuming that you have all the data, which is typically a very good thing if you're solving any mathematical problem, right? Having all the data helps you. So what is the ecosystem, right? So basically, I've divided here like 3 main blocks of platforms, right? That you can use to basically are platforms that are generating logs and generating data, and eventually you can create models on top. First, you have the ad tech ecosystem, right? Which basically you have first party, second party, and third party data, right? And we are going to see which kind of platforms you have there, right? Okay. Then you have the marketing technology ecosystem, which basically is CRM or marketing automation on those kind of platforms, right? Which basically mostly is first-party data. And then you have the internal system that you've always had that you eventually can connect to the other systems, right? Of course, in terms of with GDPR especially, now the first-party data is okay. I mean, it's easier in terms to be lawful in terms of complying with the law and tracking, having all the information. Second party and third party is getting complicated, and in fact, the third like Google, Facebook, Amazon are more and more cutting the availability of second party and third party data in terms of what you can do in terms of the data, right? There was a big cut from Facebook last year in terms of the kind of segments they would offer you, like in terms of third party data. And there is being a new cut from Google in terms of what can you do with second party and third party data in the platforms, right? So to give you a more dive in of what kind of platforms you have in the different categories, right? So in the ad tech, you are going to have your ad server, right? Which basically tracks everything you do with a consumer, right? With the impressions, with the clicks, in all the different platforms, in social, in search, in display, right? And all that interaction get logged into the database, right? So you have completely traceability of a consumer. Then you have the search and social engines, you have the demand-side platforms, Then you have the DMPs, right? And you have a few of the guys there. You know that kind of data that is generating. All that data you can collect and you can attach to an ID, you know, of course, anonymous, of a user, and you are be able to track. So with that, basically with that tech, you are able to control everything which happens outside of your domain, right? If you define, like your company, your domain is your website or your application, right? So everything which happens outside of that world, you can track with the AdTech ecosystem, but you can track everything, right? You can track everything, what is happening, and you can attach all that information to a specific ID, it can be a cookie, and so on, right? Then you have the Martech ecosystem, you know, with your CMS, your testing, your CRM, your information internally, where you can track also what happens in your domain, in your application, in your website, and there are ways to connect that information, connect the external ID of your user outside with the internal ID when they're visiting your website or your app, right? And then you have your internal system, right? That there are also ways to where you basically can map the different IDs of the different platforms, right? So with all this information, you can basically dump all this information into a common database, right? So you are to be able to track end-to-end the life of a consumer from the very first ad impression that it had with you to the very first visit in your website to the very first time it bought your product to the recommendation you give to him, and basically when it eventually it's not your client anymore, right? So in terms of optimization problem is very good, right? Because if you have a lot of data, probably you're going to be able to fix the problem, right? So in terms of the platforms, and there are the typical suspects of things you can do, you know, like different ad servers providers, different social engines providers, different DSP providers. Some of them there is integration of them right now, they change name and so on. Some DMP providers, right? So if you have a strategy of integrating all that information and connect it to a single ID, basically you are able to track everything which happens outside of your website, right? Same things with your Martech, the tools, right? Where basically you are able also, then you are, let's say, all the interactions which happen with your consumer when you are inside your application or on your website, you can connect as well, all of them. So you can understand, you can do analytics, you can do predictive model on what happens within your app or within your website, right? And the last one, what happens in your internal systems, you know, that also you can connect that information with what happens in your marketing technology systems, and then with your advertising systems, right? So, and then you start, what I was saying at the beginning, activating the data, right? If you think right now, let's say with consumers where we have this set up, basically we are getting, I don't know, gigabytes or terabytes of data, you know, because for example, I mean, for us, we are very experts in the Google Analytics and in the Adobe ecosystems, right? So we are in terms of the AdTech and Martech, so we have a lot of clients and a lot of integration and a lot of use cases, which are very specific to Adobe and to Google Analytics. But basically in all the situations we have, we are getting like, I don't know, gigabytes, terabytes of data every day, which are feeding the different advanced analytics models and the different predictive models, right? So what you can do with this information, and basically we build a platform that does all this in fact, right? So if you think about in this slide, the different phases of your go-to-market in marketing, right? So basically, you have a digital marketing phase, right? Where basically you are launching campaigns and you are launching ads to people, right? Then those consumers will interact with your digital assets, you know, your web app, your application, your web, right? Then eventually you will sell something and you will deliver something to that consumer. And when you sell something, you go into the loyalty phase, right? So with all these data sets that we are collecting from the ad server, from the DSPs, from the DMPs, from the CRMs, from the marketing automation tool, and connected to all of them, what you can build is lots of models, right? And a few of them that you can do. And all these models, if you activate them, as we said, I mean, of course, you can make decisions on them, but if you are able to activate them online with APIs, you're going to get a lot of savings of money, right? So what you can do in digital marketing for bidding strategies, for example, you can do that on the platforms. You can do lookalikes, right? You can do smart ads, which basically is getting all the data about the interaction of the consumer to create automatically ads for those consumers, right? So if I know that you visit a specific web page, then the ad I'm going to show you is going to have the text automatically, which is going to do. And if you show different image, I can create that image for you as well in real time. You can do lead scoring, propensity, right? You can do purchase propensity to buy a certain product or to revisit the web page again. You can do scorers of cookies, right? In terms of to understand if that cookie is going to revisit you or is going to buy, and you can do personalization. You can do clustering, and you can do dynamic pricing, right? So those are, and the good thing is, like, since these platforms are standard, those models are quite standard as well, right? Because when you get the Adobe dataset, and when you get the Google Analytics 360 dataset, and when you get the DoubleClick dataset, and when you get the Cracks dataset with the API, I mean, there are some things which are non-standard, but most of the things are standard. So the models, the ability to put in place the models very quickly is easy, I would say. If you go into your website, with all the data which is collected, you can do, of course, product recommender, you can do MBA, you can do product scoring, you can do dynamic pricing, you can do category listing order. The good thing is, like, basically with the information, if you use Adobe Analytics or you use Google Analytics, with the information that you have in those systems, you can go very quickly to 80% of what you could get into building a good predictive model for a product recommender or for cookie scoring, right? Then if you go to sales delivery, right? So you can do demand prediction, you can do stocks, logistic, product enrichment, you can do alerts, and we have different use cases of these things, right? And when you go to loyalty, you can do also MBA, you can do personalization, you can refill, and you can do predictions, right? So what is the difference when you have all these platforms, which are online versus what happened in the past, is that basically the data is coming continuous to you, right? And I'm an engineering background. What's happening with the data compared to the other systems is similar. It's more like an industrial process, right? Rather than a traditional IT process, right? When you think about a chemical plant, or you're using about an electric plant, right? What happens is that the flow is real, right? And you need to be able to manage the process of the different machines and the flow of materials. So basically, the data products are more similar to a industrial than which is to a traditional IT systems, which is more like event-based. And I think that's going to be one of the big changes which is happening right now when you are doing about activating predictive models, right? Because all these platforms are generating the data in real time in a standard way, so you are able to normalize them and fit the data to the different models and activate them in real time, because the nature of the platforms is online, right? So you don't need to do a lot of data processing. So then activation, so this is case, for example, this is journey optimization, right? So when you have all the data of coming from, in this case, from the Google or Facebook of your analytics, so what is the journey in terms of how your consumers are buying your product? So CPC, so start the journey, CPC is cost per click, so basically they click in a Google source, or they went to organic, or they went to other source on TPRG. So once you have built the model, basically you can understand the attribution and the different models, and basically the data you have it in BigQuery, and you have it in another database, and the models are feeding continuously and optimize continuously, right? So other thing we done, for example, we published this in this case with Marti, Germany, right? So coming back to the beginning, why CMOs are spending money on Martech and on data is because it's going to save them money, right? So in this case, in Germany, what we did is, of course, any insurer spends a lot of money doing marketing and remarketing. So remarketing are when the banners are following you, right? And Booking.com when the hotels keep following you. And so if you already bought the hotel, or if you don't want to go to that destination anymore, it's a lot of waste if that company is showing you more ads, so it's spending money. So in this case, what we do is we will, by the way, I said we are very expert in Adobe and in GA360, and all our models go in Google Cloud Platform, right? We build everything on TensorFlow and so on. So in this case, what we collect is, all the, in this case, the data sources is the Google Analytics 360 source, the ad server source, the Google AdWords source, like 4 or 5 sources, coming online from the different platforms. The model originally was a neural network, then we done XGBoost, but anyhow, again, in marketing, accuracy is not a big problem. The important thing here is like the model is running real time, so every time a new visitor visits the website or the app, it gets a score of probability to purchase the product, right? And what happens is that that information goes back automatically to all the buying platforms, right? It goes back to Google AdWords, it goes back to Facebook, it goes back to... So what happens is like automatically you stop and start campaigns and start bidding based on the purchase propensity of that user, right? And of course, the data is coming, the model keeps feeding, and we keep retraining the model with more data and with more hits for that consumer. So the results, so basically we save first 50% of investment, right away. So they were investing 200,000 per month. So the following month they were spending 100,000 and the sales were the same. Okay? So when you think about what is the ROI of investing in marketing and sales, it's very important. From investing 200,000 to invest 100,000 the following month to selling the same thing, selling the same amount of products. So what they did then is, okay, since they had the budget, they invested the same 100,000 in other strategies, so they end up selling 20% more, right? So this is published in the web in Think with Google if you want, right? We've done this model with more than 20 clients now, and it's showing the same results, right? So basically applying these data models to optimizing marketing is saving all the times between 30 and 50% of investment, right? And then another one we just published, this is in Spain also with Altamira. In this case was with Facebook, right? So it's the same process. So basically what we did is, in this case you need to, the data processing, because Facebook doesn't allow you to pass information in the, passing you information with an API, you need to do it in session in the web or in the application. In this case, we use the same of model. We combine here using purchase propensity of visitors, but also using lookalikes, using Facebook models in terms of lookalikes. And in this case, we reduce the cost per action of Altamira 25%, right? So if they were getting a visitor to houses for 100, they were basically getting the same one for 75, right? So as you can see, I mean, I'm finishing basically now. I mean, marketing and sales, it's a very interesting area in terms of building models, because the Martech and the AdTech revolution is happening. There is a lot of data. And again, it's not mission critical, and there is a lot of money. And basically, that's what we're doing, and that's all. Thank you very much. I don't know if you have any question. No questions?